Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to class tonight. Tonight we are continuing to work with the buyer, and the two forms that we're going to go over this evening is the HOA Addendum and the Adult Community Addendum. So let's get started. The HOA. So this is a form that you're only going to use if it is in an HOA or a planned community, meaning that there is a governing party over the community. They charge a monthly fee. Sometimes they charge capital improvement fees, and those fees can vary. They're all over the place. So I'm going to go over a couple of the fees and what you can expect or how you would address them when you see them in a listing agreement or when you review this with your clients. So of course, this page 1 of the HOA addendum, this is filled out by the seller. So the buyer does not touch anything on page 1. When you are putting in an offer, this should be filled out and uploaded into the MLS in under the documents tab. So let me find one, for example. It's Did I lose you all? Can you guys hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Okay,
you.
I'm so sorry. I don't know why I keep dropping my hotspot, but if it continues, then I'll make sure to go to the office for the following weeks. So just stay on if it does drop it again. Okay, perfect. Let me see if I can get my screen back here. Okay, so what I was doing is I was going to a previous listing so that we could see what I am referring to as far as where this would be. Right here under the Documents tab. So the HOA addendum should be uploaded here. And you always want to make sure that there's one of 3 pages uploaded for the HOA document. And the reason why, even though the second page doesn't really have anything on it, other than just information on what the document is for, page 3 has a little bit of information filled out regarding the seller and the premises, but this should not be filled out by the seller. This is actually going to be filled out by the buyer. So just in recap, page 1 should be filled out and uploaded into the MLS under the Documents tab so that when you are putting in an offer for your buyer, this document is already there, because you do need to know this information to make an offer on a house. You really should. If you don't, we'll kind of talk about what to do on the contract if you don't have that. Okay. So again, page 1 is filled out by the seller. They'll put the seller's name, the premises address, the date they filled it out. And why that date is important is because if they filled this out 6 months ago and it's, maybe it's January 2025 and they filled this out in 2024, well, their fees may have increased. So it might be a good idea to ask the seller's agent to get an updated HOA addendum should any of these amounts change. The seller is going to contact the HOA and get all this information. So what is the HOA name, their contact number, if there is a name other than, whatever the HOA management is, like I think our company is Vision Community Management. something like that. So it might say something like that. A contact number if it's different from the HOA number. The dues, are they paid monthly, quarterly, semi-annually? Oops, sorry, once a year. You just need to notate what they are. Any amount of special assessments. Special assessments are more common in condos or townhomes because it could be like a roof replacement. And that's an assessment that they are going to charge all of the homeowners. And that needs to be shared here, if any. Some HOAs have more than one HOA. Like they might have a master planned community, or I'm sorry, a master association that governs over the HOA. And a common area of town that has that master association might be Eastmark. They've got 2 HOAs. So again, seller's going to contact the HOA company or management company, and they're going to get all this information. So if any of this applies, they just need to make sure it's filled out. Other is kind of what else? What other kind of fees would there be? I don't know the exact name, but I think it's a FTD or something. That's another fee that Eastmark has, and that is it's a kind of like an infrastructure, a very expensive infrastructure, if that's the word, that a city prepays, if I'm not mistaken, and then the community charges that back to all the homeowners to repay over time. So I know that Eastmark has that fee, but that would be where you would note it here on the form. And again, just only put what applies to whatever HOA. And again, this is not something that we as the buyer's agent do. We just have to know what they are to explain it to our buyers. Okay, so this is the important information here. I mean, yes, this is important up here, but this is also very important because these are fees paid upon closing. So if there's a transfer fee, the association fee related to the transfer of title, the fee goes here, and that's for the HOA. If there's a master association transfer fee, that fee goes here. Capital improvement fee, otherwise known as a community improvement fee. So capital improvement or community improvement, community enhancement. That is what this is. And it clearly states here the other names that it could be called. So make sure if this community has one of those names that this is where you put it. So community improvement fees, including but not limited to those fees labeled as community reserve, asset preservation, capital reserve, working capital, community enhancement, future improvement fees or payments. If the HOA has one, you put it here. And if the master association has one, you put it here. Prepaid association fees. These are dues, assessments, or any other association fees paid in advance of their due date. And again, HOA, master association. Typically, the amount that you put here is 2 months reserve because that's what title is going to hold. So if your HOA fees are $45 per month, title is going to charge on the settlement statement $90 because that's the prepaid association fees. So just keep in mind that it is typically 2 months of dues. If it's paid semi-annually or quarterly, something like that, then it may be prorated or they may just go ahead and collect it all. But again, this is going to be shown on the settlement statement, so just make sure you review that once you get that. Disclosure fees is an associate management company's costs incurred in the preparation of a statement or other documents furnished by the association pursuant to the resale of the premises for purposes of resale disclosure, lien estoppels, and any other services related to the transfer or use of the property. Pursuant to Arizona law, disclosure fees cannot be more than an aggregate of $400 per association. As part of the disclosure fees, each association may charge a statement or other documents update fee of no more than $50 if 30 days or more have passed since the date of the original disclosure statement or the date the documents were delivered. Additionally, each association may charge a rush fee of no more than $100 if rush services are required to be performed within 72 hours after the request. So if there is an association fee, it is put here and here. I'm sorry, disclosure fee for the HOA and the association. So I did put an example of what other fees could apply. A lot of communities that have these really grand master planned communities, such as Eastmark, um, Encantera, what's another one? I think Anthem might have this fee. But basically, what it's saying is they have a capital improvement fee that is 0.05% of the purchase price. And some people think that that is like, wait, what? That sounds crazy, ridiculously high. But 0.05% of the purchase price is not that much, but it can be costly. So if you ever see this wording on a listing, make sure your buyer understands and that they understand what that's for. Another fee that you might see here could be like a $25 well, I can't think of the name, but there's a name for it. HomeWise, there it is. So sometimes you'll see on your settlement statement or on this document a $25 HomeWise fees. That's just stating that it's another fee that is negotiable, because everything on this front page is negotiable other than the disclosure fee, and I'll explain that on page 3. So the seller certification is that by signing below, the seller certifies that the information contained above is true and complete to the best of the seller's actual knowledge as of the date signed. Brokers did not verify any of the information contained herein, and the seller signed. So that is a very important statement, because we, as a seller's agent, granted we're working with buyers right now, but we as a seller's agent can never fill this form out. It is up to the seller to fill it out, because if they accidentally put something that's wrong or they miss something, they could hold us accountable for it, and you do not want to be held accountable for their mistake. Any questions on page 1? Okay. So page 2 just goes into a lot of information about an HOA and additional obligations. So line 34, if the homeowners association has less than 50 units, no later than 10 days after contract acceptance, the seller shall provide in writing to buyer the information described below as required by Arizona law. If the homeowners association has 50 or more units, the seller shall furnish notice of pending sale that contains the name and address of the buyer to the homeowners association within 5 days of contract acceptance and pursuant to section 3D of the contract. So again, you have 5 days to get this document over to the buyer or the buyer's agent after going under contract, if it has not already been provided or if it was not uploaded into the MLS for them to put with their offer. Escrow company is instructed to provide such notice on seller's behalf. The association is obligated by Arizona law to provide information described below to buyer within 10 days after receipt of the seller's notice. So the buyer is allowed 5 days after receipt of the information from the seller or homeowners association to provide written notice of seller of any disapproved items. So because we have the buyer, once HOA documents are delivered to the buyer, they then have 5 days to go over it, review it, and disapprove of anything. That includes CC&Rs, rules and regulations, anything that has to do with the HOA. And I will talk about a very important link that is sent to us, and that is technically when our 10 days start. And they don't have to prove that you received it. All they have to do is prove that they sent it, because sometimes HOA forms will go to your junk mail, and that is not the fault of the person sending it from title. So just an FYI. Okay, so information required by law to be provided to the buyer. Copy of the bylaws and the rules of the association. A copy of the declaration of covenants, conditions, and restrictions, otherwise known as CC&Rs. A date statement containing the phone number and address of the principal contact for the association, which may be an association manager company, an officer of the association, or any other person designated by the board of directors. The amount of the common expense assessment and the unpaid common expense assessment, special assessment, or other assessment fee or charge currently due and payable from the seller. A statement as to whether a portion of the unit is covered by the insurance maintained by the association, the total number of money held by the association as reserves. If the statement is being furnished by the association, a statement as to whether the records of the association reflect any alterations or improvements to the unit that violate the declaration. The association is not obligated to provide information regarding alterations and improvements that occurred more than 6 years before the proposed sale. The seller remains obligated to disclose alterations and improvements to the premises that violate the declaration. The association may take action against the buyer for violations apparent at the time of purchase that are not reflected in the association's records. Real quick on that. If you have a buyer that's purchasing a home in the HOA, the title company is going to issue what is called a HOA demand. And that is getting all of the financial documents, the updated CCNRs, everything that they can from the HOA. They're going to be given to, it's going to be given to title because they're requesting it through the HOA demand. And then from there, they push it out to the buyers and the buyer's agents. Also, when an association is notified of a sale, they are supposed to go and drive the home to make sure that there's no current HOA what's the word? Fines or penalties, something wrong. Maybe they're doing something wrong. Can't think of the word. Violations. Thank you. Okay, so they're supposed to go out and see if there's any current violations, and then they will send notification to the buyer's agent and the seller's agent to let everybody know what the current violation is and what steps need to be done to fix the violation before closing. Because if it closes and there's still that violation, the buyer is now responsible to correct that. So as the buyer's agent, these are things that you need to be looking for in your email. Don't just ignore it. Definitely make sure that you're paying attention to that kind of stuff. I did have a case where I had the buyer. We got the report from the HOA, no current violations. Great. We closed down the home. Months later, my client, who actually, my agency had ended, but obviously you keep that relationship, reached out to me and said, "Hey, Tina, how should I handle this? The HOA is stating that the current owner never got approval for the solar panels on the roof, and they never got permission for the pergola that was in the backyard, and they're asking me to take it down." And I said, "Oh my gosh, that's kind of a big deal. I need to look into this." So I reached out to title and I said, "Can you please take a look to see if there was any violations when we were under contract?" Because obviously my client didn't install the solar panels or the pergola. And sure enough, they had stated there was no violation. So we gave them a copy of that, and it ended up working in my buyer's favor. They gave him like they grandfathered it in or whatever. But just know that, you do want to keep like little records, or at least keep track of who title was in case of something like that coming up, so that you can, go to bat for your client if you need to, because that would have been a very expensive correction for the buyer had maybe the HOA said, "Oh yeah, no, here's the violation. We gave you notice of it and you still closed, and now it's a buyer's problem." Hopefully that made sense. My point is pay attention and don't just skim over something. Okay, let's see. F. If the statement is being furnished by the seller, a statement as to whether the seller has any knowledge of any alterations or improvements to the unit that violate the declaration. A statement of case of names, case numbers, or pending litigation with respect to the premises or the association, including the amount of the money claimed. They need a copy of the current operating budget, a copy of the most recent annual financial report of the association. If the report is more than 10 pages, the association may provide a summary of the report in lieu of the entire report. A copy of the most recent reserve study of the association, if any. Any other information required by law and a statement for buyer acknowledgement and signature are required by Arizona law. Okay, so it is rare, but it can happen, and it has happened to me before when I was representing the buyer. I had a buyer that wanted to purchase a home in a condo, and we got a copy of the financials, and the lender came back and said, "You're not going to believe this, but we can't do a loan on this property." They are so far delinquent that there's just no way. Based on the number of units, a condo association can only have X amount of units delinquent before the property is ineligible to be financed. And I didn't have a cash buyer. They needed a loan to purchase this home. So I kind of thought outside the box. I knew that the seller needed to sell this property. And I said, well, why don't we get the amount from the association of what is delinquent or how much would need to be paid to get the property to X amount of units so that we can get financing. And the seller actually agreed to pay the past due amounts for X amount of units so that she could sell her home. Because if it didn't get paid, then they couldn't sell it and nobody could buy it. So it was kind of an outside of the box thinking, but it worked. We were able to get the financing, we closed, everybody was happy. So again, reviewing those association budgets is super important. Not that you're going to do that. Everybody back? Hopefully you can hear me. Can you all hear me? Okay, cool. Okay, looks like I'm gonna be going to the office from now on because I don't know why it's doing this. Or I'll contact my carrier, but anyways. Okay, so that was page 2. Page 2 is boring, but it does have a lot of information. Basically just what, by law they have to be given or what has to be given to the buyer. So when you're typing the offer for your buyer, page 3 is what you would fill out. So the buyer's name has to be on here. Seller's name should already be on there from when the seller uploaded it. And then of course the premises address should already be on there. So page 3, line 71 through 76. This is probably the most important part of this document because you need to determine who's paying for the transfer fee. Is it going to be the buyer, the seller, or other, which is, usually split 50-50? Who's paying for the capital improvement fees? Keeping in mind, capital improvement fees have a couple different names: reserve account, community enhancement, whatever it might be. That is what this is referring to. Who's paying for that? Any additional fees not disclosed on page 1 and payable upon close of escrow shall be paid by buyer, seller, or other. I always say if it's not disclosed, then I feel the seller should be responsible for that. So again, everything's negotiable. If the buyer wants to make their offer stronger, then they would just put buyer. Buyer shall pay all prepaid association fees. The seller shall pay all disclosure fees as required by Arizona law. So this does need to be paid by the seller. It clearly states it on this page. So the seller would need to be aware that they're going to see that on their settlement statement when then we go to closing. In a finance purchase, the buyer shall be responsible for all lender fees charged to obtain association management company's documents. So that's like any rushing fees, any HOA demand fees, that kind of stuff. Buyer verification, the buyer may contact the association management companies for verbal verification of association fees payable upon close of escrow. Note how it says buyer. The buyer can contact them. You don't contact them. If it's important to them, they are to do their due diligence. But we are hoping that the seller has given us accurate information. Assessments are any current homeowner association assessment, which is a lien as a close of escrow, shall be paid in full by the seller. And any assessment that becomes a lien after close of escrow is a buyer's responsibility. Additional terms and conditions, just if for some reason you need to add something. I've never ever added anything, so I don't even know what you would add there, but you do have the option. And then the buyer is acknowledging that by signing below, they have received all 3 pages of this addendum and acknowledges that although seller has used best efforts to identify the amount of the fees stated herein, the precise amount of any fees may not be known until written disclosure documents are furnished by the association management company per Arizona law. And the buyer further acknowledges that the broker did not verify any of the information contained herein, and that the buyer agrees to hold seller and broker harmless should the fees payable upon close of escrow prove incorrect or incomplete. The undersigned agrees to the additional terms and conditions set forth above and acknowledges receipt of the copy herein. Buyer signs, they provide this with their offer, seller accepts it, or if they want to counter it, they would still sign here, and then on the counter offer, they would say, maybe like line 73, buyer to pay transfer fee if you selected seller. So that is the HOA addendum. Does anybody have any questions about that? Perfect. So you might be wondering, well, why are we doing this other addendum if all we were doing was covering the HOA addendum? And the reason being is because if you have a 55 and older community, you need to include this addendum. And a lot of the information is repetitive, but you still need both of them. So the Adult Community Advisory Addendum just has the buyer's name, the seller's name, and the address. The fees, the buyers advise that the premises is located within an adult community and that there may be seller and buyer fees applicable to resell, purchase, or transfer the property ownership located in age-restricted communities. It's going to have the community name and the community phone number. Age restrictions are established by each community and are subject by federal law and federal, state, and local fair housing laws. The capital improvement fee, capital preservation fee, the buyer is advised fees, including but not limited to capital improvement, capital preservation fees, recreation fees, may be affected by the way title is taken, changed, or transferred. The buyer should obtain independent legal and tax advice. Lakefront property and boat restrictions, buyers advise that additional dues and or fees may apply if the property line is line for the premises borders a lake. Oh, a CFD, that's what it was called. A community facilities district. Buyer is advised that some communities are located within special taxing districts, such as a CFD. The purpose of the CFD is to finance the acquisition, construction, operation, and maintenance of the public infrastructure benefiting the planned community. A CFD is generally considered an assessment lien against the premises. Water and wastewater service providers. The buyer is advised that there are private and public service providers specific to areas and communities. Trash and recycle services, annual service cost, if applicable, will be prorated at close of escrow. Military airport, buyer is advised that due to the location and vicinity of the Luke Air Force Base, the community will experience overflight jet noise. Of course, this is only on the west side, Sun City. Definitely you would be using this because it's 55 and older. Golf cart ownership and use, buyer is advised to contact the Special Community Association office and or the golf course to verify any restrictions as of the use of gas or electric battery powered golf carts. These restrictions vary from community to community. Golf carts are not limited to the golf course use, but sorry. Let me start over. Golf carts are not limited to golf course use only, but can be used as a means of transportation within a given community. Governing documents, buyer is advised There may be specific governing documents applicable to the community, including but not limited to covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Restrictions vary from community to community. If any of the above information is a material matter to the buyer, it must be investigated during the inspection period. So again, this is kind of repetitive information, but some of it's more detailed because it is in a adult community. Is the premises located or not located in the community of Sun City or Sun City West? If the premises is not, please skip to the signature line. If it's located within the community, recreation fees in the amount of, and it's per person on the deed or per household apply and shall be paid by the buyer. The buyer agrees to pay the transfer fee, capital improvement fee, or any other fees. And again, this might be duplicate information that you're pulling from the HOA addendum, and that's okay. You still need to fill this out. If there's any recording fees, resale disclosure, other fees, anything like that, that would be noted here. And this is what the seller agrees to pay. The party listing the amount of the fees entered above has done so in good faith and to the best of their knowledge. However, the precise amount of the fees may not be known until written disclosure documents are furnished by the community or their management company. The parties are instructed to personally verify all fees prior to execution of the adult community advisory and addendum. The parties acknowledge that brokers did not verify any of the information contained herein and therefore agreed to hold each other and broker harmless should the fees identified above prove incorrect or incomplete. Buyer seller information, everybody signs, and this is part of the contract. So if you know that you are writing an offer that is in an adult community, on the first page of the contract, line 37, I think, you would check other, and then you would put adult community advisory and addendum because you're making it part of the contract. And this form would only be used, again, if it's 55 and older. Otherwise, you would only use the HOA addendum. And if it's 55 and older, you use both of these addendums, even though it's technically the same information. You just have to make sure this form is with it. And that is the class tonight. So we went over the HOA addendum and the adult community advisory addendum. Does anyone have any questions based on the material we covered tonight? Perfect. Thank you so much for coming to class. I do want to let you know that we will not have class for the next 2 weeks, but I'm going to go ahead and stop recording and we can talk a little bit more about that. Have a great night.